So, we made this device, and I don't know, like a couple of years into it, we realized Dave had all these respiratory therapy devices at his house. He's a quadriplegic. He's got very low lung capacity and lung function. So, he's got some very expensive stuff and some very cheap plastic junk that just collects dust. And he never used any of it. But we realized that he was doing, his respiratory therapy without even knowing it.
Our podcast today is brought to you by DZS Clinical Services, a small premier CRO with international full-service capabilities. DZS is a technology-enabled CRO bringing the best tools in the industry combined with expertise and an understanding that clinical development companies need partners, not just service providers. If you need a CRO to help support some or all of your next project, check them out at www.dzs.com. And don't forget to subscribe. And I have one more favor to ask before we jump into the show. If you like this episode, please share it with just one person you think might benefit or gain some insights from it. On today's episode, we're joined by Mike DiCesare, founder and president of Zephyrx. Zephyrx has developed a remote respiratory monitoring platform that is innovative and potentially life-changing for a lot of patients. Mike is also the founder of Jambox, which is a hands-free breath-powered instrument built for musicians of all ages. There is a connection between the two companies. I want to let Mike explain that. But Mike is a lifelong problem solver and a leader in the life sciences space. And I'm very excited to have him on the show. Mike, welcome to the episode.
Hey, thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, as a child, I was asthmatic and experienced various respiratory emergencies and episodes throughout my life. So your platform and what you're doing, it's a personal note for me. But can you explain a little for our audience what Zephyrx is and why remote respiratory monitoring is so critical and important to patients?
Sure. Well, I'll start by explaining the product. And, basically the Zephyrx, it consists of three different pieces. It's essentially a handheld FDA-cleared spirometer with a mobile application that lives on a patient's phone or tablet and a cloud-based platform that the physicians or care team will use. And the combination of those three allow us to get lab quality pulmonary function test results from the patient's home. So as you know, the pulmonary function test is extremely important in diagnosing and managing any type of respiratory disease or condition. And it's so much more convenient for the patient and very timely too, because of COVID and restrictions on pulmonary function testing in hospitals.
Yeah. Mike, so right, the connection between these patients that have a respiratory condition, they can't travel, it might be dangerous for them to go into the clinics and the hospitals. What are and you mentioned that the platform can be used on any patient with a respiratory condition, but is there a certain type of patient or condition that you find it's being most used for?
Sure. So, we've focused initially on the cystic fibrosis community, and that through a partnership with the CF Foundation, we were able to work with all of the cystic fibrosis patients in the U.S. They got one of these spirometers, and they're using our apps, and that was a great synergy there. But since then, we've branched out to other patient populations. We do a lot of work with the ALS community. You can imagine getting to a clinic is not easy for those patients. And also we're doing a lot of work with lung transplant patients that need to do these tests, typically on a daily basis to monitor the organ.
Oh, that's excellent. Excellent. Mike, I mentioned in the intro that you're also the founder of a company called Jambox. It's a music-related company. I was looking at some of the videos, and maybe we'll include some of the links to the videos. I think it's awesome. Sure. Can you talk a little? So that's two companies that you've founded and launched and are involved in. Can you talk a little bit about your personal journey and the development and the relationship between the companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love talking about the Jambox. That was the reason that all this happened, and I'll kind of go through the beginning of that. But I was a musician, and always, I have a great love of music. It's basically my identity. If anybody that really knows me,
That's great.
And it's crazy how this stuff works out. But I was working for a family insurance company, and my next door neighbor, my parents' next door neighbor, a guy I grew up next to, is a quadriplegic from a skiing accident. And, he wanted to play music. He was really into, learning how to express himself musically and trying to figure out how. And he could play a harmonica, essentially, as the only instrument he could play. And we developed a hands-free electronic harmonica that's breath powered. So you breathe into it, you move your head back and forth. There's sensors on it, and it, you trigger different notes, and through the software, like GarageBand or these other digital audio workstations, we're able to trigger these incredibly expressive electronic sounds. And you could also play video games with it too. So we made this device, and I don't know, like a couple of years into it, we realized Dave had all these respiratory therapy devices at his house. He's a quadriplegic. He's got very low lung capacity and lung function. So, he's got some very expensive stuff and some very cheap plastic junk that just collects dust. And he never used any of it. But we realized that he was doing, his respiratory therapy without even knowing it. It was this active distraction that the music and the gaming provided. Yeah. So we decided to pivot, and how we got started in the healthcare space was that we had this musical instrument, and we applied to the NIH and the NHLBI, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and they loved what we were doing. They gave us a fast track grant. So it's a phase 1 and 2 combined fast track grant to look at the gamification of the incentive spirometry exercise. So that is something that every patient in a hospital has one of these things on their bed. You inhale, there's a little ping pong ball that goes up. I'm sure you're familiar with those. And we gamified that. So we made a bunch of games. We got a suite of like 8 different games that we have. And we were doing a clinical trial showing the effect of gamification on that. So what we saw is extremely low compliance in the traditional incentive spirometer. And we saw, just tremendous results with ours. And it's a couple different factors. It's not just the gamification of it. It's the fact that the patients now are being tracked, and the doctor will know if they actually used it or not. And they can't just nod their head when the doctor or the nurse comes in and, they ask you, have you been using this device? And just nod. So, we saw tremendous results from that trial. But during that trial, COVID hit, and that's how we pivoted into the at-home pulmonary function testing that you could do with the device. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. But it's a great story.
Yeah, no, it is. It's awesome. And for folks listening, please go and find Jambox. It's a really cool instrument. I mean, it's professional level, some of the things that it can do. Yeah. I can imagine just having a great time with that. That's great.
Yeah. So we've got, it was built as just an accessible instrument for anybody. So from somebody with, cognitive disabilities that can have fun and just express themselves, all the way up to professional musicians.
Awesome. All right. So that leads me into the question of, you've launched 2 businesses. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, from a business standpoint, what are some of the things that you found challenging, particularly in developing a medical device or a life sciences therapeutic? What are some of the challenges you had there? Hardware.
The hardware business is the toughest. Anybody that is in this will know that it's just extremely expensive to develop, and just a tough process to get anything actually built from concept to reality. We did that with the Jambox. I could show you prototypes all the way to the finished product, and it took years and years and years to do. And that lesson served us well with the Zephyrx product, because we decided to license the hardware from our partner company, who we didn't have to develop it, right? I mean, they already had the FDA clearance for it. They already had that. We could focus on what we do best, is the software development, the mobile application, and the cloud-based platform. So the lesson that I learned with the Jambox, even though it was great, we have a patent on it, we have multiple patents on it, we developed this thing. It was such a great learning experience. But I think my key takeaway from that is to get out of the hardware business when you can.
What was the challenge? What you said, multiple what is it? Was it just getting was it the function? Was it getting the right fit for patients? What were the challenges there?
Yeah, sure. So we had to develop our own sensor, our own actual sensor that worked. It's just, the Jambox has a proprietary linear sensor that's actually made on a silicon wafer, and that had to be done because there was no existing sensor that would fit the requirements that we had for this, where you need to essentially be contactless. You're moving your head back and forth playing this instrument. You don't want to have a lot of resistance there, but it also needs to be very durable, and you're breathing into this instrument. So a lot of the linear sensors out there are very sensitive. So you need something actually waterproof, and dust isn't going to affect it, that type of thing. So we decided not to try to reinvent the wheel with Zephyrx, and license hardware that was out there and available, that already had the FDA clearances as well.
Mike, last question. What's next for Zephyrx? So what's in the future pipeline development? What's the next step for Zephyrx?
Yeah, sure. So what we're excited about, I think I mentioned, you asked about the patient populations that we're working with. And I mentioned 3 different rare disease types. So I mentioned cystic fibrosis, lung transplant population, and ALS. And that's not a very large patient population when you look at it. Combined patient count of maybe under 100,000 between all 3 of those. And we really have our eyes set on the COPD space and trying to tackle the COPD readmission problem that is just plaguing the country. It's just a tremendous cost. I was looking up some of the numbers before, and it's $50 billion annual issue for the country. So you get this revolving door of COPD readmissions, and we really think that we can prove that we can keep people home and triage them at home, and cut down on the emergency department visits and these readmissions that are happening all the time.
Oh, that's great. And right, a super critical issue and expensive to the healthcare industry. So good luck. I think this is a great place to end the show. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks for a great discussion. If any of our listeners want to reach out to you or Zephyrx, what's the best way to contact you?
Our website is Zephyrx.com, Zephrx.com, and anybody can email me directly. It's very easy. It's just Mike@Zephyrx.com.
Perfect. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
All right. Thank you, Greg. It's been fantastic. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It was a great discussion with Mike, and please join us for our next show coming up soon.